Welcome to the 15th Annual State of Indian Nations. We're so happy that you could join us today here in the Night Studio in Washington, D.C. Kusin yohatuasak, suka adi ayahat, kagwantan yari yehetak. My English name is Jacqueline Peda, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Congress of American Indians, the oldest and largest, most representative American Indian and Alaska Native organization serving the broad interests of tribal governments and communities. As our part in our effort to further the goals of Indian country, NCAI brings together tribal leaders, government officials, and members of Congress to discuss the challenges, opportunities, and solutions and issues faced by our communities. Partnership is what today is all about. We have a packed house here of tribal leaders, members of Congress, senior federal officials, students, and so many others who have dedicated themselves to working on the issues facing Indian country. I want to thank each of you for attending the State of Indian Nations and for those thousands of you listening to this event all over the country and around the world. We are pleased to be joined live streamed by the tribes including the Crow Nation, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, the Hickory Apache Nation, Citizen Potawatomi Nation, the Lummi Nation, the Lenape Indian Tribe of Delaware, and by organizations including the Institute for Tribal Government of Portland State University, the Alaska Federation of Natives, the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute, the Yakama Nation Fisheries, and others. I want to welcome our partners from Congress and the administration who are here with us today, and there actually is too many for us to just name. There are leaders also from 18 tribes who are here in the audience with us. We are also joined today by members of the NCAI board who represent regions across the country, including Aaron Payment, Carolyn Bolio, Joe Garcia, Lance Gums, Norman Hildebrand, Bruce Ignacio, Jerry Isaac, Terry Pepper, Jack Potter, Roger Rader, Teresa Sheldon, Mel Sheldon Jr., Tony Small, Larry Townsend, and Larry White Jr. We want to acknowledge the leaders and the staff of many of our partner organizations who are in the audience with us today, who we couldn't do this work without them. And I want to just give one special shout out and thank Ernie Stevens Jr., who has been with us at every single State of Indian Nations. We are honored to have several important NCAI partners from outside of Indian countries represented here, including the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Walmart, and Google. I also want to recognize our future leaders here in Washington, D.C. by welcoming the students from so many of the colleges and the educational programs. We also want to extend our thanks to Senator John Hoeven, who will be joining us and providing the congressional response. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the 21st President of the National Congress of American Indians, Brian Clattersby, to deliver the State of Indian Nations address. President Clattersby was first elected as president of NCAI in October of 2013 and re-elected in 2015. He has served as the Swinomish Indian Tribal Community Chairman since 1997 and has dedicated his career to Native peoples at home and across Indian country. He is a distinguished leader in his home state of Washington and a respected Native ambassador across the nation. President Clattersby is a protector of tribal sovereignty and a creator of innovative solutions and community challenges. Please join me in welcoming NCAI President Brian Clattersby.
Othli siab, oglapid ishid, lapath tifla diapid, tifla uyayus, lapath tifla hail, altudi shaks tulaguaflub, ACM. My dear people, we are thanking you for the work that you do, the road we walk to help our people. I thank you. I thank the Creator for bringing us together, tribal leaders, our trustees from the United States government, my fellow tribal citizens, my fellow Americans. I am blessed and honored to be giving my final State of Indian Nations address as the 21st President of the National Congress of American Indians. The federal election in November marked the end of the Obama presidency and the most successful government-to-government relationship Indian people have enjoyed since the formation of the United States. We welcome President Trump and look forward to working with the Trump administration to build on the tremendous successes of the last 8 years. As we begin a new Congress and a new administration, I am reminded that throughout American history, in challenging times and changing times, Native people have remained a constant. We are, in the words of Chief Seattle, like the stars that never change. Today, we stand ready to work with you as partners to build a stronger America, to build on the shared history between our nations, and to seize the opportunities to strengthen the relationship between tribal governments and the federal government. Together, we will lead America into a new era of progress and partnership. The partnership between tribal governments and the federal government can be described by one word: trust. With regard to the relationship between the United States and tribal governments, trust is a sacred obligation accepted by the federal government in exchange for the millions of acres of land we ceded that created the greatest nation in the world. The evidence of our common history is all around us. Alabama, Missouri, and Miami are all names derived from tribal nations. Utah and Arizona, Seattle and Manhattan are names inspired by Native people and languages. This very capital city of Washington, D.C., rests on the lands of the Piscataway people and the Potawatomi people, the namesake of the Potomac River. The unbridged version of this history is not often taught in our schools. It needs to be. It is not the story of colonists and intrepid pioneers, of cultural exchange and westward expansion into so-called unoccupied territory. It is a story of lands and resources stolen, families removed from their homelands, forced assimilation into ways of life that were not our own. Yet, it is a story of the resilience of Native peoples and the endurance of tribal governments. For thousands of years, we have had strong, sophisticated, sovereign governments. America's founding fathers recognized this fact. In 1789, the United States adopted its Constitution, molded after the great Iroquois Confederacy. It specifically gave Congress the power to regulate commerce not only with foreign nations and states, but also with Indian tribes. It recognized our treaties as the supreme law of the land. That same year, the new Congress passed one of the most important acts, the Northwest Ordinance. Among other things, it set forth the principles of our trust relationship. I want to quote the text of this law. It states, "The utmost good faith shall always be observed toward the Indians. Their land and property shall never be taken without their consent. And in their property, rights, and liberty, They shall never be invaded or disturbed. Obviously, the young country did not do a very good job of honoring these commitments. Tribes were invaded and tribes were disturbed. Many of us were relocated off our homelands. My own tribe, the Swinomish tribe, had our reservation land taken without our consent. Despite continuing breaches of these promises, in hundreds of instances, tribal governments entered into solemn agreements with the federal government. My own great-great-grandfather, Kelkaltsoot, signed the Treaty of Point Elliott in 1855. Through these treaties, tribal nations relinquished significant portions of our original territories, and the federal government became the trustee for hundreds of tribal governments and millions of acres of tribal lands that remained. This means now and forever that every federal official is our trustee. It's the sacred responsibility that all of our elected officials share. That is where our story of progress and partnership begins. From the very start, tribal governments have been on equal footing with state governments and must remain so today. In exchange for our lands, the federal government made 3 promises: to never take our remaining lands without our consent, to safeguard our right to govern ourselves on these lands, and to enact laws that protect our economies, our treaties, and our ways of life. This is the foundation of the trust relationship on which we have built our modern government-to-government partnership. Recently, we worked with Congress to pass the Tribal Law and Order Act and the Violence Against Women Act to strengthen community safety and tribal justice systems. And now, tribal law enforcement departments like the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla in Idaho have access to national criminal databases that help them better protect their people. We worked with Congress to pass the Hearth Act and the Indian Trust Asset Reform Act to further empower tribes to make decisions about their lands and their assets. And now, tribes like Okeawigne Pueblo in New Mexico are regulating wind and solar energy leases on their lands. We worked with Congress to pass the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act to modernize tribal healthcare networks and ensure that every Native American and Alaskan Native receives the healthcare promised in our treaties. And now tribal governments are implementing these and other new policies. These policies work because they provide tribes with the flexibility we need to craft our own local solutions to our own distinct challenges. In the process, we are innovating in our governments, revitalizing our communities, and growing our economies. And we continue to partner with other governments to meet common challenges. Partnerships like these are especially important in rural areas. More than 70% of Indian country is rural. Indian people know firsthand that quality health care is harder to get outside of the cities. Native peoples like the Coeur d'Alene Tribe of Idaho have set out to change that. In partnership with the city of Plummer, Idaho, they built the Benawa Medical Center. Today, the center serves thousands of people from Plummer and the surrounding areas. Tribes are stepping up, not only to take care of their own people, but to take care of their entire regions. Indian people define prosperity in many ways, not just economic, but also spiritual, cultural, and collective prosperity. When tribal nations lift up communities, we want no one to get left behind. That is why the Citizen Potawatomi Nation of Oklahoma built a healthcare center for the non-native spouses and children of tribal citizens. There are countless examples of tribal governments investing in their communities and creating jobs for their own people and those who live in their surrounding communities. The Shakopee Midwakaton Sioux community, a tribe of just a few hundred, employs more than 4,000 through its retail, gaming, and other businesses. The Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians has been the economic engine for its region of Mississippi, transforming one of the poorest areas in the country into a growing economy that employs thousands. Now, I was a little shocked by this next statistic I'm going to share with you, but nearly 72,000 tribal farm operators run more than 56,000 farms with a market value of products sold that exceeds $3 billion. Indian country stands ready to partner with anyone and everyone who will work us to help build a stronger America. So this is what we ask of the new Congress and the new administration. Make good on the promise of our trust relationship. Abide by the treaties. Affirm the wisdom of local decision-making by Indian country for Indian country. Together, we must remove the obstacles that prevent tribes from fulfilling our potential as nations and neighbors. We must ensure that tribes can deploy all of the essential tools that all governments must have in order to build prosperous communities. Not everyone realizes that most tribes cannot tax sales on their reservations because of the problem of dual taxation by the states. A few states have reached tax agreements with tribes, but for those, and the most part, the states enjoy taxing our reservations without providing services. We have a great opportunity for the Department of Interior to issue new regulations that will eliminate the unfair burden of dual taxation on reservation economies. The new administration has already scheduled a series of consultation meetings that start next week at Swinomish. Unlike every state and local government, tribes cannot issue tax-exempt bonds for economic development because the IRS only allows us to use them for public works, like water treatment. This unfairness is short-sighted and cannot stand. Tribal governments should be able to use the same tools that every government use every single day. Congress should include Indian country in broader tax reform. And when it does, it must give us full authority to generate revenue, access capital, and invest locally. In a rare moment of bipartisanship recently, Congress passed the General Welfare Exclusion Act, recognizing that tribal government programs benefiting tribal members are not taxable by the federal or state government. Tribal governments have demonstrated that when we exercise our innate authority with adequate resources and autonomy, we will devise local solutions that work for our communities. We plan and budget our governing operations based on commitments made through the federal trust responsibility. Like other governments, we provide police services, education, fire protection, and a range of core public services for our people. But tribal self-sufficiency is not merely an integral component of the trust responsibility. It is also an investment opportunity. Investing in Indian country has proven time and time again to produce high returns. And perhaps no investment has a greater potential upside than infrastructure. Today, the National Congress of American Indians released an initial report regarding tribal infrastructure investments. It provides tribal leaders and policymakers with data to inform the many ways in which Indian country is proposing to meet its own infrastructure needs. To us, infrastructure means more than roads and bridges, more than housing and broadband internet connection. It also means education and healthcare, workforce development infrastructure, data and planning infrastructure to support smart, informed decision-making. Both Indian country and rural America, where infrastructure has fallen into a state of disrepair, share a common concern here. Necessary maintenance and new projects have met delay after delay. Let me be clear. Economic development is important. Investing in community infrastructure is important. And the most important long-term investments that we can make are in our children. Partnering creates winning scenarios. When the Congress takes up infrastructure, it can create American jobs by addressing the $388 million backlog of deferred maintenance of Bureau of Indian Education schools. Statistics show that when Indian kids graduate from high school and college, they become contributing members of society. They break the cycle of drug and alcohol abuse. They break the cycle of jail and prison. They break the cycle of poverty and dependence on the federal government. Educated tribal members not only make their community stronger, they also make America stronger. Kevin Gover, the former Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, once said, "Sovereignty isn't about power. It's about responsibility." And we as tribal leaders take that responsibility to our people very seriously. Just as we had long before European explorers and settlers arrived, and just as we always will. President Ronald Reagan astutely recognized in 1988, and I quote, "Tribes need the freedom to spend the money available to them, to create a better quality of life and meet their needs as they define them. Tribes must make those decisions, not the federal government," end quote. The federal government should partner with us to remove burdens that tribal governments bear alone. Our partnership and progress must extend to the issue of energy development. Colorado, for example, does not charge a fee to explore for energy resources on its land. And it turns around permits in about 2 months. But to undertake the same exploration on tribal lands includes the additional challenge of the Bureau of Land Management fee of $9,500. And it takes up to 7 months to turn around the same permit. The result of these regulations is that tribes pay more and spend more time, a lot more time for a lot worse service. This is a missed opportunity for all of America. Indian country holds 20% of the oil and gas reserves. If fully developed, these resources could generate $1 trillion in economic activity. Now, whether or not to develop their energy resources is a choice that each tribal nation must make on their own terms and in accordance with their own values and goals. For tribal nations that make this choice, the tools are already in place to get started. Congress created the Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program, and if the federal government invested just $9 million, it would support up to $85 million for energy projects that would employ people in Indian country and the surrounding communities. Congress needs to back up their investment idea with real investment and fund the program. Tribal governments are proving what real investment can accomplish. Decades ago, the Southern Ute Indian Tribe of Colorado created their own tribal Department of Energy and an economic growth fund. Today, they control the distribution of roughly 1% of America's natural gas supply. Last year, one of the Moapa Band of Paiute of Nevada solar projects began powering more than 100,000 homes in Los Angeles. And last month, the 7 bands of the Sioux Nation began construction of one of the largest wind power developments in the entire nation. These projects are designed with sustainability in mind. Not just environmental sustainability, but also the cultural, spiritual, and economic sustainability of the entire tribal community. Tribal governments embody the enduring values of Native peoples. We understand that each of our decisions connects our past to our future. We think about the Indian country we want our grandchildren to pass on to their grandchildren. Culture matters. It is both who we are and how we govern. That is what makes working with tribal governments different from working with other governments. Each tribe has its own culture, its own language, its own customs, and its own priorities. And that is why the local tribe must be at the table where local decisions are being made, starting at the earliest planning stages. We have seen too many examples of what happens when tribes do not have a seat at the table. The Dakota Access Pipeline is one. In that case, the company consulted the nearby city, but not the nearby tribe, and made the mistake of turning sacred lands into a construction site. Other tribal governments have tried to prevent the worst, only to succeed in stopping a project after hundreds of grave sites were unearthed. We can never forget the period in the 50s and 60s when rivers across the West were dammed. Hundreds of thousands of acres of tribal lands were flooded. Hundreds of tribal homes were destroyed. In the Columbia River region in my state, the salmon way of life was threatened, all disturbed without the consent of tribal governments, all in violation of treaties that protected these lands and resources. One day, the Spokane tribe in Washington, like so many other tribes, woke up one morning to find that there were no more salmon in their river. When this happens, no one wins. Not tribal governments, not the federal government, not developers. Everyone, at the end of the day, pays a high price, an unnecessary price. And yet, there are so many instances in which we see what's possible when Native peoples do have a seat at the table. The Blackfeet from Montana partnered with hunters, anglers, conservationists, energy companies, and the Department of Interior to cancel more than 40,000 acres of illegal oil and gas leases. By working together, they prevented drilling on the sacred lands at Badger to Medicine. As we go forward, we will continue to work with the Department of the Interior to create lasting solutions for Indian country. Partnerships have proven to generate the highest return on investment, for they avoid the high costs of conflict between governments. Work with us to identify and implement win-win solutions. There is a Seneca proverb that says, "He who would do great things should not attempt them all alone." Our partnership goes back a long way. Back to the time before the Stars and Stripes were first sewn into the flag, and before the republic for which it stands was born. Tribal nations have been a constant, like the stars that never change. We stood with you at every critical moment of American history, from the Revolutionary War to the World Wars, to the Vietnam War, to the War on Terror. A greater percentage of Native people have served and died in the military than of any other group of Americans. We will always stand with you. We will always fight alongside you. And through our age-old partnership, we will usher in a new era of progress. God bless you. God bless our Indian nations. And God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, President Clasby, for that powerful message on the value of partnership. As I said earlier, we've invited as a member of Congress to provide a congressional response to the state of Indian nations. And we are very pleased to be joined by Senator John Hoeven. Senator Hoeven has long experience on tribal issues based on his 10 years of service as the governor of North Dakota. He has brought that experience to Congress and was recently selected as the chair of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. He is a strong advocate on behalf of Native children, especially those in the foster care system. We look forward to working with Senator Hoeven on energy development, infrastructure, and all the other issues that affect Indian country and tribal governments in this Congress. Please join me in welcoming Senator John Hoeven.
Thank you, Jackie, for that nice introduction. And President Clattersby, I enjoyed your remarks very much. That was very well said and very well done. It's an honor to be here with all of you, and I want to extend you my greetings, and certainly want to extend my greetings to any of our North Dakota tribal members who are either here or listening. Again, it's good to be with you. I'm honored to serve and work with the Indian nations as the new chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs in this 115th Congress. I'm looking forward to working with the vice chairman, Senator Tom Udall. We have a very good relationship. We work well together. From New Mexico, I am guessing. Tom and I are good friends, and we work very well together. And we certainly want to lead in a very bipartisan way on this important Senate committee. Too often across the nation, the partisanship or issues can become very divisive. However, there is more common ground than division to be found on Indian issues. And I agree with President Clattersby that together we can build a stronger America. And I am committed to working with you, Mr. President, to do just that. I believe if we work in a bipartisan way, we can create jobs, we can raise the standard of living and quality of life in Indian communities across this great land. This has been a long-standing position and a priority of the committee as well. We have great opportunity to continue the good work advanced by Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, the former chairman, and also my a very good friend, working with Dr. Barrasso on many issues, as well as the vice chairman, our former vice chairman, Senator John Tester, who continues to be a member of the committee. Somebody from Montana? Oh yeah, there we go. Biggest, yeah, okay. Last Congress, 22 Indian bills became law. 55 were passed by the full committee, and some of those passed the full Senate as well. In this session of Congress, I intend to hit the ground running and clear the decks, so to speak. So already, on February 8th, the committee passed 9 bills. We passed 9 bills already out of the committee. And I don't think any other committee, I know no other committee has done that. And these are, yeah, thank you. These are bills that were worked on in the last Congress and had bipartisan support. So we wanted to move them out of the committee and get them to the floor right away so that our members can go to work, get them through the Senate, and then get them over to the House and get them passed. Beyond these bills, I want to focus on some areas that are particularly important to Indian tribes, Mr. President, some that you mentioned. Jobs and economic development, healthcare, energy, housing, public safety, and veterans. And you spoke very eloquently about our Native American veterans, and I will too. We thank them. Confident that even despite the diversity of views on issues such as Dakota Access Pipeline, Mr. President, which you mentioned, we can work together and we will work together on the federal regulatory process. Going forward, we can review the permitting process to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard and that a fair, certain, and legal process is followed. The role of government is to create a positive business climate to spur job creation and economic growth, and to create more opportunity for all. If we empower Indian tribes and other partners to invest, innovate, and create jobs, we will build a higher standard of living for our citizens across Indian country. To achieve this, we must first start by encouraging investment. This will attract innovation and help entrepreneurs succeed with new enterprises. Chairman Cloudesby talked about some of the amazing enterprises in Indian country and their huge economic impact. We have to build on that with more investment and more support for both tribally owned enterprises and individual entrepreneur, native-owned enterprises. We need them both. It makes all of us stronger in Indian country and beyond. One legislative measure that I will be introducing soon is the Indian Economic Enhancement Act, the ICE bill for short. It was introduced in the last Congress by then Chairman Senator Barrasso and featured an array of economic enhancement tools for Indian businesses. It's a good step in the right direction for investment and empowerment. Investment and empowerment. Think of those words every day, particularly for our young people. Investment in their future and empowerment. I urge tribal leaders to join me in getting this bill signed into law this Congress. And I would like to continue working on more opportunities for economic enhancement in this Congress, beginning with a robust discussion on infrastructure. Mr. President, you touched on infrastructure in your remarks, and you're right, the importance of investing in our infrastructure across Indian lands. The infrastructure needs of the Indian communities are great. Indian country needs to be at the table when we discuss any infrastructure measures considered by Congress. And we're talking about doing an infrastructure bill in this Congress. And I hope we do. I think it's very important. It's important for our whole country. And we need to be at the table on behalf of Indian country when we discuss that infrastructure package and when we build that infrastructure package. But with any opportunity, we must make the most of it. We look forward to hearing how investments can pay off in the long run and secure self-sufficiency for Indian tribes and Indian people. Both the committee and Indian tribes will need to work hand in hand in advancing an Indian package that is tailored for local communities. And working together, we can enhance the quality of life for Indian people. We also need to recognize that flexibility is critical for Indian communities and economies. Flexibility was a hallmark of the Indian housing law the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act, which is long overdue for reauthorization. The Act and associated funding are intended to benefit Indian families by authorizing the construction of affordable and much-needed housing on reservations across the country. With the unacceptably high rates of homelessness and overcrowding in Indian communities, it is incumbent upon this committee to require accountability in administering these programs. I intend to introduce a similar bill this year to reauthorize the Indian Housing Block Grant Program. We must be united in seeing this bill signed into the law this year as well. It's no surprise that tribes face significant bureaucratic hurdles in administering programs, engaging in economic development, or managing resources. President Clattersby indicated that such flexibility and empowerment requires modernizing specific policies and mentioned the Energy Development Act in particular and the opportunity in energy. When a tribe can lose up to $95 million because of bureaucratic delays, it's obvious that something is wrong, but more obvious that something needs to be done about it. To that end, I have introduced the Indian Tribal Energy Development and Self-Determination Act of 2017. This bill directs the Department of the Interior to provide Indian tribes with technical assistance in planning their energy resource development programs. Chairman Clattersby, you talked about the example in Colorado. We can do much better, much better. If there's not a fee off reservation, why is there a fee on reservation for energy development, right? If it takes 2 months to get a permit off reservation, why does it take 2 years on the reservation, right? We can do much better. And remember, it's Native American Indian Self-Determination Act. Again, it's about how you want to develop your energy resources. Very important. This bill directs the Department of Interior to provide Indian tribes with technical assistance in planning their energy resource development programs. It's been introduced in each of the past 4 Congresses, primarily by the former chairman of the committee. Senator Barrasso did that in the last Congress. Before him, Senator Tester did it when he was chairman in the prior Congress, and it goes all the way back to when Senator Dorgan from my state of North Dakota was chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee. This Congress, let's get it passed. Yeah? In the last Congress alone, this bill passed the Senate twice as a standalone bill and as part of a national energy package. But why is it important? It's important because it represents a big step towards tribal self-determination in developing tribal resources. That was the approach began in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. Because of bureaucracy, however, more flexibility and certainty is needed for tribes to achieve their development goals. And this bill would address those issues. And it's long past time to get it signed into law. On February 8th, the committee moved this legislation, and I expect it to pass the full Senate very soon, and I urge you to work with me to get it passed through the House and signed into law. Healthcare. We need to do much better on healthcare, and there's much we can do with the Indian Health Services. Mr. President, you talked about this. We are concerned, of course, about how to use our financial resources in this country as well as possible. In these difficult budget times, we have to be mindful to restore a strong financial position for the country so that we don't burden future generations with unsustainable debt. So certainly accountability will continue to be very important to the committee. But there's so much more we can do with Indian Health Services. Last Congress, the committee dug into many longstanding issues such as poor health care delivery in areas served by IHS. Well, the Indian Health Services may sometimes be the only health care provider available to Indian people. It should operate as if it's in a competitive medical field. That is, it should provide the best care and services possible and ensure that patients are treated with dignity and respect. They should be well cared for during their time of healing. It must work effectively, yet right now, while it is returning millions of dollars back to the Treasury, there are many unmet tribal health care needs. Now, there are many good and hardworking people in the Indian Health Services, but improvements are needed. These types of improvements were incorporated into the IHS Accountability Act, which was passed by our committee last year. And I intend to introduce a very similar bill this year along with a House companion bill. It is a vitally important step toward raising the quality of life in Indian communities. Think about it for just a minute. Indian Health Services is turning back millions of dollars. They're turning back money at a time when we have real needs for health care in Indian country, right? This is something that we can work on and make a difference in people's lives on the reservation right now by improving the service delivery. And so this will certainly be a priority. Public safety and veterans. In considering the quality of life for Indian people, I can think of nothing more honorable and necessary than taking care of the most vulnerable, our children, and taking care of those who have given so much for our liberties, our veterans. Again, and I want to echo the remarks of President Clattersby. First, our children. Last Congress, I introduced the Native American Children's Safety Act, which was signed into law in June of last year. It's an important safety net for our children. This act requires that background checks are conducted on all adults living in a potential foster care home before a tribal court may place a child in that home. The measure ensures that Native American children living on a reservation have the same protections when assigned to foster care that children living off the reservation have. A decade ago, we worked in my home state of North Dakota to ensure that all adults living in a foster home had background checks to protect children in their care. Now we have extended that safety net for children in tribal foster care, not just across our state, but across the nation. I intend to work with the new administration to ensure that this act is fully implemented as intended and that Indian children are safe in foster care homes. And I look forward to working with tribes on continued improvements for child protection services. This is an important part of public safety. As one of the founding members of the bipartisan United States Senate Law Enforcement Caucus, I will continue to facilitate communication and coordination among local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. That coordination is critical when it involves prevention, response, and protecting victims of crime. The SURVIVE Act, which stands for Securing Urgent Resources for Victim and Indian Victim Empowerment, is a critical bill and one of the top legislative priorities for this committee. It not only secures a tribal-specific set-aside from the Crime Victims Fund, but it also provides 3 key requirements that place the program operations squarely in local tribal control. The bill would require negotiated rulemaking with tribes to ensure tribes have substantial input into how the program would be run and how funds would be distributed, giving you more control over those funds. It would also expand the authorized uses for funds to address the local needs of tribes. Indian Victim Services would also be sent over to the Office of Justice Services in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which operates locally in many tribal communities and has a better working knowledge of Indian tribes. And with regard to our veterans, we must never take for granted the sacrifices of our servicemen and our servicewomen. Indians have served this country in proportionally higher numbers than other populations, many serving even before Indians had citizenship in this country. According to the Department of Defense, 27 Native Americans have been awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military honor. The storied history of the Code Talkers, who came from many tribes, is now well known, and their contribution to this country are legendary. With this type of service, Indian veterans must be recognized and they must be honored. I intend to work closely with my colleagues in identifying and addressing issues facing Indian veterans. In doing so, I hope to extend the gratitude to those who have given so much in the service to our nation. Investing in veterans in child protection, in victims protection, infrastructure, in economic development. All of these are important for Indian country. And I look forward to hearing from you as to how we can best make these investments and educate both our House and Senate colleagues to that end. Our committee stands ready to go to work with all of you. And again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be with you, Mr. President. It is an honor to be with you and to work with you. And I'd like to wish you all a great day. God bless.
Please join me in thanking Senator Hoeven again for his comments today. And I'd also like to take just 1 minute to mention one other board member that I missed earlier this morning, Leanna Olin. We're so glad that you're also here with us today. So at this time, we would welcome questions here from the press and our audience for President Claspy or myself.
And before I do that, I think I made a mistake giving Coeur d'Alene to a different state. Which one was it, Nina? Umatilla. I gave them to Idaho.
Oregon.
Idaho doesn't want them.
Okay.
Is that right? No.
Okay.
They're Oregon. They're Oregon. I apologize to my brothers
Thank
and sisters.
Thank you. So
President Garcia.
I had other instructions.
Oh.
I appreciate the words, the good words that you've spoken about our Indian country and the country in general. My question is related to technology in Indian country. I think that the personal data that I've seen and the personal data that has, or the data that's been shared, I think we should recognize that we have not hit critical mass in terms of technology know-how, and it's got to start from the early years of our children, so that they can go on to college and whatnot. But then it goes on. You cannot do energy development if we're weak on technology, knowledge base, if you will. So I think, what are your thoughts on where we stand in terms of technology?
And after I answer that, Jackie has a couple more instructions she wants to relay. But that is very important. I believe almost 50% of Indian country lacks broadband infrastructure. And, when you think of our tribal schools, our tribal kids, and their access to this technology to help them out in their school settings, they are a step behind because of that. And so, we've been working with the companies to access this. I believe recently there was the Gila River in NCAI teamed up together with, what's the company?
Cisco Systems.
Yes, they are going to do a takeover, and one of the requirements we asked of them was to look at infrastructure needs in Indian country as a part of this buyout from this company. And they represent almost 25% of Indian country in this area.
That was a different, they actually had a workshop with the Cisco System folks earlier, and no, the buyout is actually with, I can't remember, Century, that's who it-
CenturyLink.
Yeah, CenturyLink. And we've been having conversations with the FCC. President Clattersby's gone a couple times, and almost every week our team is having conversations with the FCC right now. So there's a lot of good technology conversations happening. I do want to just finish by giving the rest of the instructions out. So the rest of you, if you have a question, you raise your hand. As you saw, our staff will bring a microphone to you. And please make sure that you state your name and who you represent. And for those that are watching online, we have staff monitoring the live stream chat functions of either hashtag SOIN 2017, and we'll take your questions. We'll intermerse them. I'll be receiving them on my iPad Live. All right.
What's our time frame?
We'll float.
Okay.
Yeah. So any questions here in the audience? Yes.
Thank you, President Gladys B. Don Sampson. I'm from the Umatilla tribe of Oregon. Got you on that?
Of course.
We love you. We love you, Brian. Yeah, one of the things I want to talk quickly about climate change. I work with the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians on climate change. We have a bi-coastal collaborative with the folks from the United Southern and Eastern Tribes. Any people here from USET? Yeah. So what part of the issue, of course, and I know Swinomish is one of the leaders in the Northwest dealing with climate change. And today and now we have huge impacts across Indian country. And we have one of the first tribes that are climate refugees in America. And that's the Biloxi Chitimacha Choctaw tribe down in Louisiana. They are now having to relocate from their homelands. We have other tribes, the Shishmura village in Alaska, and 31 other Alaska Native villages who are being threatened all across the country, whether it be the Shinnecock Indian Nation in New York or your own tribe in Washington. We have now an administration that is a climate denier. We have Scott Pruitt, who's now the EPA administrator. How important in the priority list for NCI is climate change and continuing the progress that the Obama administration has made, not only in Paris, but working with tribes across the country, and how will we work with this new administration and Congress so that we can protect the gains we've made, and I hope you all will continue to support our efforts to address climate change and the impacts for our Native people.
That's a very good question, Don. You know, there's a certain segment of society that does not want to say the word climate change or global warming. Our board had a meeting with Senator Hovind's staff yesterday, and we talked to them about the impacts that tribes are experiencing because of this phenomenon. And I said to him, now if there are certain segments of society that do not want to say those words, climate change, let's look at something else that we can call it from a tribal perspective. Let's say environmental impacts on indigenous communities. How does that sound? Environmental impacts on indigenous communities. We know it's happening. We see it happening. Our communities are place-based societies, and we are experiencing it firsthand. And so that was the discussion we had yesterday with them. Let's have a hearing. Let's have a discussion at the table talking about the environmental impacts on our indigenous communities, because it is affecting our way of life, as you have indicated. So we are slowly reaching out with this administration, and I don't believe the EPA administrator is confirmed yet, but we will be reaching out to him as soon as he is confirmed, and we'll be working through NCA and other tribal leaders to make sure that is addressed. Next question.
Get one of the gentleman right there in the blue shirt. You.
Microphone's coming, yes.
To you.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Matt Laszlo, Daily Beast and National Native News. I just wanted to know, what is your relationship now with the Trump? I guess now it's his staff is still getting confirmed, but with the transition team, have the channels that you had with the Obama administration, are they still open? And what are your fears going forward in this transition period to the new administration? And then also, what are your thoughts on the repeal and replace of Obamacare? What are you hearing from tribal members? Do you feel like you'll have a voice in that debate going forward?
Well, this isn't the first time that tribes have experienced a transition of power from one administration to the next and from one party to the next. And so we've always looked at our issues as nonpartisan. We've looked at our issues and seen that we've had friends on both sides of the aisle. You just heard Senator Hovind from the Republican Party talk about his priorities for Indian country. And so as NCAI goes forward with this administration, we're a single issue organization focusing exclusively on Indian issues. So we haven't got to the point yet where we are fearing this administration. This administration is still just starting. It's only 3 weeks old, but Jackie and her team has had many conversations with individuals before the president was inaugurated. The transition team came to our NCAI meeting in December, and it was the only meeting the transition team had with any group in the U.S., and that was the Native Americans. And so as far as the Obamacare, you know, it's no secret that the Republicans have passed 50 or 60 bills to repeal Obamacare that will have an impact on tribal communities, especially those tribal members who don't live in their areas, that live outside of their tribal communities, that rely on this. And so we'll make it very clear that we do have concerns. We've been assured, but we haven't seen it in writing yet, from individuals that say that the Indian Health Care Improvement Act, which was passed along with the Affordable Care Act in 2010, will not be ripped apart, taken away, or repealed. So we've heard that. We haven't seen it in writing. We haven't heard it from, the highest elected officials, but we've heard it from our friends that they will protect our Indian Health Care Improvement Act. Next question.
I just want
Yeah.
to clarify. So the meeting that, first of all, the meeting in December that tribes attended with the transition team was hosted by the Native American Caucus for the Trump transition, but it was on January 19th when we had our meeting with the 6 members of the transition team, and it was standing room only with tribal leaders. Thank you.
Chairman Buster Atterbury, Crook Tribe, located in Northern California. So kind of a comment and maybe get your opinion on it. I would just like to encourage all tribal leaders we have a big push to get the data that we need from tribes to help support healthcare and education. That's just 2 of the areas that I know that we've talked about. The Karuk tribe in particular, we're one of the tribes that serve the entire community or communities. We have 3 different locations for our health clinics, 2 locations for our dental clinics, but we lack the facilities. We have some unmet needs, and we're a non-reservation tribe. Education, sometimes we get overlooked. I know that has been a discussion at the TBIC meetings, and we appreciate that. There's possible set aside for 2018. But I would love to encourage the tribal leaders to get the data in. We recently had our Pacific Region TBIC meeting, and the push there was to get the tribes to get to know. We have a lot of small tribes right now. We're grant-based. If we're going to meet these unmet needs, we need to kind of go to more of a needs-based, and we do need that data. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Atterbury. That's he's making a great point there, and this was one of the focuses on my speech: infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. As many of you seen, this president is trying to work with this Congress to pass an aggressive infrastructure package. And I encourage all of Indian country, I encourage all of the leaders out there, when President Obama did his shovel-ready projects, his stimulus program, when he first came into office in 2009, some of the tribes were ready with their shovel-ready projects, and some of the tribes benefited from those projects. But other tribes were left behind. And we had needs back then, just like we have needs now. So I encourage you as tribal leaders, get your infrastructure needs documented, like a dental clinic, a medical clinic, a school. Those things have to be documented so we can show the need. If funding in the United States of America was based on need and statistics, we would have the highest funding of any segment of society, because we can show the need in healthcare, we could show the need in our education, we can show the need in our program. So that's a great question, Mr. Chairman, and I encourage all of you tribal leaders, please have your infrastructure projects that you need completed in Indian country ready to go when this Congress passes that infrastructure bill spending.
So since we're talking about health a little bit, I just want to take a question from one of our online. This is from Dana. How do you see tribal sovereignty leading the way in health innovations? As an example, the dental health aid therapist program that you might have an announcement for.
Yes. So in the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act in 2010, any Alaska natives here? Alaska started the dental health aid therapy program 10 years ago. About 6 years ago, I was sent back here to Kellogg to learn about this program and meet dental therapists. And immediately I said, Swinomish needs this. Little did I know, in 2010, when the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act was passed, the American Dental Association, along with some of our friends here in D.C. at IHS and in the Senate and Congress, allowed the ADA to insert a poison pill in the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act that said any tribe basically outside of Alaska in the lower 48 that wants to have a dental therapist program needs to go to your state legislature to get that paternalistic approval and okay. Very outdated way of doing business. And so not understanding that and being brought to my attention, we started introducing bills in Olympia to allow our tribes to have a therapy program. The American Dental Association last year killed the therapy program in 12 states. 12 states. They knew that if they got that poison pill in there, they could buy their legislators and destroy this. Last year, 2 years ago, I got so frustrated with the process that I told my team, just get me a therapy program. I don't care. And so last year on January 4th, the Swinomish tribe became the first tribe in the nation in the lower 48 to offer a therapy program without the approval of the state government or without approval of the federal government. And so I thank Kellogg for supporting that program. And it's not sustainable, though. Because we did it on our own, we could not get IHS to pay for it, or we could not do third-party billings. That's why we needed permission from the state. And so about 4 weeks ago, the American Dental Association came to Swinomish and said, this year, we are not going to oppose your bill. We will not support it. We will stand down. So in short order, in the last 2 weeks, the bill was passed out of the House. It was passed out of the Senate. And when I go home, the governor will sign that bill. And so I encourage all 567 tribes to look into this program because it works in Alaska, it works in Swinomish, and it can work in your communities.
Mel, do you have a question?
Thank you very much. Mel Sheldon, Chairman of Tulalip Tribes, and I want to thank Jackie for your leadership, your day-to-day work at NCAI. Our hands up to you. And Mr. President, a big high five to you. Thank you for your leadership. And also, I'd like to take this time to thank Indian Country all over for their support to the Standing Rock Sioux. And Senator Hoeven has mentioned some potential solutions, but I know that NCAI has been working on different ways to resolve this issue, and if we don't get a resolve, I'm sure that the protests this summer are going to be much larger. So, Mr. President, would you care to comment on potential resolutions?
Sure. You know, this has been one issue that has galvanized not only Indian country, but the world. I just watching Michael Jackson's daughter and the Grammys last night that stood up and said, no DAPL. And, you know, that's the kind of attention this is getting. Chairman Archambault is taking a lot of grief right now, both externally because of his strong position on this. And NCAI has worked closely with the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe on this issue. One of the issues that we keep reiterating over and over is let us be at the table early in the process, because we can show you what happens when tribes are not at the table. As many of you know, this project originally started with the pipeline going above Bismarck. And the people of Bismarck said no. The pipeline companies went and consulted with them. And the people of Bismarck says, no, we don't want this pipeline above our city because you might contaminate our water supply. So the company made the decision to move that pipeline a half a mile in front of an Indian reservation. And the last administration made the decision to make them do a full EIS. As many of you know, that was recently overturned, and the Corps allowed, just last week, the continuation of that pipeline underneath Standing Rock Sacred Grounds. And so the next move is we will continue to support, and they will go to the judge, ask for a temporary restraining order, and hopefully ask the judge to force them to do a full EIS going forward.
So there really is two solutions moving forward. One, of course, is the legal process, and we also know Cheyenne River has also joined in that legal process. The other one is the administrative process, and we're hoping that, NCAI, with all of the tribes got together during the consultations, we actually developed a 53-page document as part of those consultations of that include our recommendations going forward. So we're hoping that the administration, the Interagency Council on the streamlined process for permitting and infrastructure will take a look at those recommendations and include tribes rightfully in the process. Those will provide solutions, at least to the longer term issues. And we have time for a couple more questions.
Lance? And we'll go over here. Who else had a hand over here? Chairman?
Thank you, President Glasby. Lance Gumbs from the Shinnecock Indian Nation in New York. One of the points that has been overlooked, and I'm hoping that it'll get back on the agenda, is the Carcieri issue. That's a major issue for tribes like mine in the Northeast, and for tribes that have been recognized after 1934. And we need to keep that process moving. It seems to continue to be linked to gaming, and for us, it's not linked to gaming. This is about tribes like mine having the ability to acquire new lands. So I'd just like to hear, what NCAI is going to do moving forward to educate not only the new administration, but to educate Indian country as well, as to what, this means to tribes like mine and other tribes that are not able to take land into trust.
Thank you, Lance. And, that's a very, the Carcieri issue has been going on way too long. NCAI provided testimony 2 years ago on this issue, and we spoke to the exact same thing that you're talking to, where we would hope for just a clean fix. That would be easy. But as you know, senators and congressmen and their constituents are throwing in gaming, land into trust, newly recognized tribes, and all those other issues. In our testimony 2 years ago, we said those are issues we need to have at the table to talk about, but let's do it in a different forum. And so we will continue to advocate. As you know, I believe we've had success on the House side, but the Senate side is the struggle for us. And that is where we need, as you know, 60 senators to support this. And that's been the uphill battle for us, to try to get that amount of senators to support a clean fix because of the issues you raised, the gaming issues, the land into trust issues, the newly recognized tribes issues that they're trying to throw into the clean Carcieri fix. So we'll continue to advocate for a clean fix this year. And we talked, as you know, yesterday with Senator Hovind's staff about that issue that was brought up.
We have time for one quick question.
Chairman?
Got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name's Sean Chapoose. I'm the chairman of the Ute Tribe. We all know that we've had a national monument designated, which has been controversial. My tribe is one of the 5 tribes who participate in this. But I'd like it to bring the attention of you, which I know you've been supportive, but also the attack on lands within reservations and the public land debate. So I would hope going forward that NCI and all tribal leaders will pay close attention and continue to fight, because as you stated before in your speech, we as Indian people have been displaced throughout history. Our homelands are now basically attacked again. So I would hope, that we as a nation, as Indian country, would stand united and protect what last refuge we all have. So with that, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said in my speech, 1789, when that language was passed, we need to keep reminding these elected officials, we need to bring them a copy of that. And we need to tell them our story, how that promise wasn't kept. Because every single tribe in here has lost lands after we signed those promises. Every one of us. Many of us are still fighting to get recognized, re-recognized. There's a whole list of tribes out there that are still fighting to get their recognition. So, Chairman, we definitely need to continue to educate these new congressmen and the old congressmen. We need to show them the maps. We need to tell our story. One of the greatest role models I've ever had the opportunity to work with was the great Billy Frank Jr. And he always told us, tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. Never get tired of telling your story. Tell it over and over and over again. He says, because a lot of the times it'll go in one ear and out the other, and it might take you 10 times telling your story before they get it. And so we have to use our experiences and what happened to us as our story to hopefully make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. So that's all the time we have for questions today at the audience. And once again, if we didn't answer your question, please see a member of our staff. We'll be glad to answer your question. Those that you have submitted questions online, we'll answer that, and we'll continue to answer questions throughout as we move forward. So we'd also like to ask you to take a look at our website. We have a number of the publications that were mentioned today posted on the website. And enjoy our Executive Council winter session here this week. Thank you very much, President Clattisby. Thank you all for being here with us. And thank all of you in Indian Country who are watching. Gunesh Cheesh.
And thank you.